Three things media can do: reactively report what's happening,
Victor wrote that story immediately, right? Capture that moment.
translate what's happening,
Techpoint went on a different angle, and it was like a people's story.
catalyze what could happen.
And Zuckerberg came back to Nigeria and wore his suits and then went to a government thing.
Somebody that we all look at like, oh, Silicon Valley has come all the way to Africa.
But they blocked us. We couldn't get access. We didn't even know anything.
It was at that moment, like, I have to remember that, okay, we are journalists.
We did what we had to do, right? We made most of what we could find.
You know the power of being an underdog. You don't remain an underdog forever. All you need is a tiny little window. And when you have that tiny little opening in that window, you're prepared and you take your opportunities. Then you grow. And nobody can say, who are those again?
So 2016, we had kind of started like getting our groove, and there are salaries to pay and all of that. You have to start thinking about how to, make money to pay salaries and whatnot. You can't continue to depend on Aduali if you're going out. The salary is like, maybe he'll go and do a photography gig, and his money he makes from there, we used to pay salaries and all of that. So I remember we got a call, a cryptic call, two different cryptic calls. Of course, they could not reveal that it's Zuckerberg that was coming, right? So the first cryptic call was from CCO. They called Aduali and like, oh, show up tomorrow, something's happening. And it was like, what is happening? Like, just show up. Yeah, what is happening? Just show up. And like, then I also received the call, right? This was about the town hall he was going to do at Landmark, apparently. So they're like, oh, some Facebook employees coming, would like you to come and cover it. And we're like, we'll send Rick card now. This is how we do it. They're like, we don't want to pay. I was like, we have salaries to pay, all this kind of thing. Like, you have to pay. So like, okay. And the person said, okay, they didn't even push for that.
Like now you could find like people want to tell their stories. Then most people were not, media, they're not really taking you serious or anything.
So we're just in the office that day, the next day. And then someone just said, Zuckerberg is in Nigeria, he's at CCO.
I remember I was eating amala somewhere opposite our office, and I just saw the news online on social media or something.
Like, what? I don't get. Nah, it's not true. And then we started seeing selfies being posted on Facebook and Twitter, like different people posting selfies, like, this guy is actually there. They're like, oh, is that why they called us? Okay.
It was like he was Christ and everybody wanted to touch the hem of his garment.
So I left my food, I ran back to the office, and the team said they didn't know, so we weren't invited.
There was this sort of like, okay, you guys have not arrived, because if you've arrived, then you would definitely be in the room.
I became the editor-in-chief that day. They didn't invite us. We've missed. Good. Are we going to suck? Are we going to be crying? I don't care. Everybody start looking for story.
It was at that moment, like, I have to remember that, okay, we are journalists. People want to know why Zuckerberg is in Nigeria, right? So whether or not we go to take a selfie with him, there are stories to tell here. And then we have found out that, oh, he's doing a town hall the next day. Because it kind of invite only, there were two events. There was a dummy one and there was a real one, right? So we got wind of where both of them were, but we're not sure which one was which. So we split ourselves. Aduwale went to one, I think the one in Landmark. I went to the other one. I got to where I was and I found out mine was the dummy one. So I called him like, stay where you are, this one is the dummy one. And then, of course, I was like, what am I doing here? I'm wasting my time here. I need to go back to the office.
I think that Mark's visit was quite a turning point where we did break globally, and then everybody who was writing stories about Mark's visit had an angle.
Meanwhile, it's an editorial based, and we just kept on bringing out things. It was just like, what is the next thing that we're going to do? What is the next thing that we're going to do?
We now came with one idea. One of the person was like,
all the people that were around him were Nigerians. Are there more Nigerians like that work at Silicon Valley?
It's something simple that when you think about it now, you're like, what's the big deal? But we were that behind.
So I told Ifeanyi to start researching. We split each other, split and started researching.
We made most of what we could find, right, at within the limit of resources that were available. And
we found, first of all, 10 Nigerians that work at Facebook, and the list eventually became 18, right? And that story just blew.
People now saw the list. People were like, oh, I went to school with this. People were now sending email. Oh, my cousin worked with Facebook. You should update it.
If we didn't know before then, we now understood what our job was. Our job was not to take selfies or be the cool kids. Our job was to tell stories. People want to know what's going on.
We could have sit down and just be blaming everybody, the industry. Why did you block us out? Why did you do this thing? And that story changed the way we write story.
We were capturing stories from all angles.
So something happened, basically. Mark Zuckerberg comes to Nigeria, then goes to Yaba, and, does meetings with the people in tech ecosystem, goes to run on the bridge, basically talks to and communes with the ecosystem, then he leaves. He goes to, I don't know if it's Kigali or Nairobi now, and straight up goes to the government house, where he meets with the government. And for me, I just sat down there. It was just, call it deduction, call it reaching. But in my head, I'm like, what does this point to? It was like, those were like kind of deductive opinion type pieces. What did this point to? This person doesn't rate this government. And I wrote the story and I published it.
Eventually, he came back to Abuja. Right? We believe it's because of our story that he came back to Abuja.
And I remember that it caused a ruckus. And they're like, hey, problem. How dare you say something like that? Something.
Apparently, people in the VP's office did not like that story.
I didn't even know the article they said we should pull down. I was just fighting. We are not going to put this article down. I don't care what you say. We stand by everything we publish. Because I knew, this article had to go through Muiwa. If the article went through Muiwa, I'm back in 100%.
So that statement was a very bold statement because, you're talking about who's the vice president, yeah.
And guess what? I was heading to Aso Rock that day. They could have just pushed me into one of the places that day because I was going to, and I was just defending. I said, I did nothing.
We ended up in Abuja and then eventually we were there where Zuckerberg was. Without an iota of doubt, Mark Zuckerberg's visit was a turning point for the ecosystem and for Techpoint.
He changed the game for us. We just realized we're serious business now.
There was a validation of the work we're doing, and finally, Yabacon value was recognized.
Also, we know nobody's going to hand you anything. You have to take it.
But somehow we just knew that it was just beyond Yaba. And this is where we know that the story was just starting. Our story didn't end there.